Torah. All right, good evening. We are going to be learning tonight Daf Daled and Daf Hey Amud Aleph. Just a scheduling note, this coming week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I will be out of town, but we're still learning Zoom, same exact time, same exact link as if it's 5 weeks ago in COVID land, so not much of a difference. We will continue at the same pace, the same amount of dafim per night, etc. There might be one exception to that on next Thursday night. I don't yet know my schedule. I'll let you know. All right, I have 50 minutes, last 49 and a half minutes to get tomorrow, and we have a blot and a half to go, so let's get started. We're on the bottom of Daf Gimel Amud Beis. We are 5 lines from the bottom where it says V'ha'ika Ritzufim. And just as a reminder, what we've been talking about is how many units of tfachim are there within an amma. How many tfachim are there within an amma? That is the question that our Gemara was dealing with. And we said that when it comes to the world of kilayim, we said that it is an amma bas shisha tfachim. We said that by kilayim, that what we're dealing with is 6 tfachim per amma. So here the Gemara opens with a concern that some of the Tanaim don't seem to agree with that. And here is how the concern plays out. Says the Gemara as follows: there's a scenario of what's called ritzufim. Ritzufim is vines that are too close to each other. And Rashi here on the bottom has a wild language. Dibra hamaskil, v'ha'ika ritzufim, 5 lines from the bottom. Rashi says, kfanim ritzufim, they're too close to each other. Shesmucha shura l'shura, yoser mimash shanasnu chachamim shir, she'im ein bein shura l'shura dalet amos, eino kerem. It doesn't have the din of being a kerem, and therefore kilai hakerem, the din changes. So that's our Gemara's question. If you have ritzufim, then if you measure with the larger amount of shisha tfachim be'ama, that's a kula, because it will assume then that you have a larger space in order to determine whether or not these are considered a kerem or whether or not it's considered to be ritzufim. And this is a machlokes in the Tanaim. D'tanan kerem hanotea. If you have a vineyard that's planted out pachos me arba amos, where each row is less than the requisite dalet amos between them, then Reb Shimon Omer ain't no kerem. Nope, nothing. It's a zero. You're allowed to plant things right next to it. It doesn't have the din of a kerem. You can't have kiloi kerem if you don't have a kerem. And then says the Gemara, v'chachamim omrim kerem. It is a kerem, but v'roan es ha'imtzaim ki'ilu einam. But all the stuff in between doesn't have the status. Like the outside ones are considered kerem, but the ones in the middle, the ones that are imtzaim, they are ki'ilu einam. It's as if they are not there. So this poses a problem for the Gemara, because according to the Shita of Abaye quoting Rav Nachman, which is where all of this started at the 2 dots toward the top of the page, 10 lines down, Abaye in the name of Rav Nachman, he said that it's always going to be lechumra, and he also said that it's going to be 6 amos for kilayim. So here we see that would be a kula. So answers the Gemara 1 of 2 questions. Number 1 is that Abaye holds kirabanan de amre have kerem. No, he holds no leniencies at all. He doesn't hold of this idea of ritzufim like the sheet of Reb Shimon. He holds like this Mishnah in the name of the Chachamim. That's answer number 1. And answer number 2, we could even hold like the sheet of Reb Shimon, that really there is no din of kerem. What is the concern about shisha amos, but shisha tfachim ba'ama as it relates to kiloya kerem? So no, we don't. It's true that by most cases, v'rov amos kamar, most cases by kiloya kerem are shisha tfachim ba'ama. But here, by the case of ritzufim within Reb Shimon, we would hold chamesh amos bekerem and chamesh tfachim be'ama, and that would then work out according to Abaye. Now, all of this has been Abaye within the camp of Rav Nachman. Now, we're going to see a different version of Rav Nachman from a different Talmud. Rav Nachman was a 3rd century Amora. Abaye and Rava lived at the same time. As we know, they argue all the time throughout Shas, and they did not understand Rav Nachman the same way. So as we just saw at the top of the page yesterday, we saw that Abaye understood Rav Nachman that in different scenarios we hold either 6 tfachim per amma or 5. We saw different examples by Mavui and by Sukkah versus Kilayim. And here is approach number 2 within the camp of Rav Nachman, 2 lines from the bottom. The Rava Mishmed Rav Nachman Amar, what was his approach to understand his Rebbe Rav Nachman? No. Kol amos be'ama bas shisha. All amos are amos bas shisha. There's no 5. Ella, what is the difference between certain scenarios? Ella, halalu shochakos vehalalu atzavos. It depends. Just a visual aid. This is a tefach atzuv. This is a tefach shachuk. That is the difference. That's I'm unfortunate to explain this. In other places in Shas, we hear this idea of a tefach shachuk. That's when your hand is more relaxed. A tefach atzuv is very tightly measured. So that would be the difference. The Meforshim here, some of the Achronim explain this idea. What is this whole thing about various amos? And the answer is that we had to be somewhat lenient. They didn't have like a measuring stick, mamish. They were measuring. The middle finger in halacha is considered to be the measure of the amma. So my forearm is a different length than your forearm. So they were approximating by tefach too. You're measuring by a fist. It depends. Everybody's hands are a little different. So sometimes we needed a little bit more of a either lenient or machmir, depending on the application. But that's what this means. So version number 1 of Rav Nachman in the name of Abai that we learned on the top of the page yesterday is that it depends 5 or 6. And here we're saying, no, Rav Nachman never said that. What Rav Nachman was saying was shachuk versus atzu, loose versus tight set of tvachim, whatever it is. Asks the Gemara, trying to declare who do we hold like Rava in the name of Rav Nachman or Abaye in the name of Rav Nachman. Meisivei, last line of Gimel Amud Beis. Kol amos shamru chachamim be'ama bas shisha. This is a source in the Tanaim. All of the amos that the chachamim said are 6. Ubilvad shelo yehu mechuvanos, provided that they are not exacting. Says the Gemara. Bishlam ala Rabbi, I understand approach number 2 as it relates to this source in the Tanaim. I got it. I understand the world of Rabbi. Bishlam ala Rabbi ki hechi delehavian halalu shachakos vehalalu atzavos. I can understand the difference. Because this Mishnah that we just learned uses the language of mechuvanos, which means exacting, which is this. It's the fingers together. I understand this source in the Tanaim. Elale Abaye kasha. But Abaye, everything is 6. The only question is shachuk or atzu. So how does Abaye understand this Mishnah? This source in the Tanaim that we just learned, the Meisivei, on the bottom of Gimel Amud Beis, does not work for Abaye because Abaye says 5 or 6 in the name of Rav Nachman. And Rava says no, it's all 6. It's just a question of shachuk or atzu. Answers the Gemara. Omar loch Abaye ema amas kilayim be'ama bashisha. You're missing a word in this Mishnah. Go back to the Mishnah at the bottom. Meisvei kol amos, and he would add in here be'ama kol amos she'amru chachamim be'ama shel kilayim bashisha. He adds in the words. It says you just miss. You don't have the right girsa. Okay. Ask the Gemara. No. Lamidikatani seifa. In a later source in the Tanaim, we have the following. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kol Amos Shamru Chachamim B'Kilayim Be'ama Bashisha Ubilvad Shlo Yihu Mitzumtzamos. Provided that it's not so tight, that's a sheet of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Mechlal, what does that imply about the Tanakama? That the Tanakama was not talking about Kilayim. Mechlal, the Tanakama, Kol Amos Ka'amar, was talking about all types of things, which brings our question back against Abaye. So what is Abaye going to do? Amar Lach Abaye. The lav mi'ika Reb Shimon ben Gamliel dekoi kavasi. You're right, the Chachamim don't align with me, but it's not like I don't have a precedent. The Shita you just quoted, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, is mamish me. It says kilayim, and it says it's sheish amos, as long as it's not mitzum tzamos. Perfect. But he says, I have that sheet, and I hold like them. Ana, the amrei Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. And then says the Gemara as a commentary on this discussion, Abaye vaday tanoihi. Clearly, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel in our Tanakama, according to Abaye, certainly the way Abaye understood, there's a machlokes tanaim there. He holds like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, not like the Tanakama, who seems to say that all of the amos are going to be a question of sheish amos, just a question of, all of them are going to be sheish amos, with only a question of whether or not it's shachuk or atzuv. So then for sure, by him, it's going to be a machlokes. The Rava, but according to Rava, would we say that there's a machlokes tanaim? Amar lach Rava. Let's see. Rashbag ha'asa la'ashmuinan. What is he coming to teach me? Amas kilayim lo yitzamtzim. What he's trying to say, maybe says Rava, is that amas kilayim, when it comes to kilayim lo yitzamtzim, that we do not measure b'tzimtzum. We do not measure atzu. We only measure shachur. Says the Gemara. Well, wait a minute. The lema. Amas kilayim lo yitzamtzim. If that's the case, then why didn't Reb Shimon ben Gamliel say that? He added words. He added ba'ama bas shisha. Why do we need that? Why do we lemeute mai? Why then would we have those words? Lav lemeute amas sukkah ve'amas mavui. Doesn't this come to teach us to exclude cases like amas sukkah ve'amas mavui? And that is going to be a kasha on Abaye. Says Gemara lo lemeute ama yisod ve'ama sovev. No, it's going to teach us to learn that all of the following cases that we're about to learn are not bas shisha, but rather they are bas chamisha. What are they? Tichsi, a long pasuk. The pasuk reads, "Ve'ela midos hamizbeach ba'amos ama ama v'tofach v'chek ha'ama ve'ama rocha v'gvula el sfasa saviv zeres ha'echad v'zeh gav hamizbeach." A description of measurements of the mizbeach. And now the Gemara is going to analyze piece by piece what this pasuk is referring to. We are about halfway down on Daled Amud Aleph. Chek ha'ama What does the pasuk mean when it says Cheka Amma Zeh Yesod? That's the foundational part of the Mizbech, the one that's lowest to the ground. The Amma Rochav Zeh Sovev. That's something that goes around the Mizbech. That's a little bit higher. Ugvula El Sfasa Saviv. What does that part of the pasuk mean? Elu HaKronos. As you know, the Mizbech had 4 Kronos, Amma by Amma, sitting at the 4 corners. The Zeh Gav HaMizbech. What's that? Zeh Mizbech HaZahav. That Mizbech HaZahav, that is the golden Mizbech. And basically what this pasuk does, by virtue of the fact that we see that this is the exclusion to Rashbag, this supports still the Shita of Abaye, and therefore Abaye and Rava are both supported in their Shitas. As learners, without Rishonim, we could not paskin on this Gemara. It is not clear, because both Rava, in the name of Rav Nachman, and Abaye, in the name of Rav Nachman, have enough to support themselves to keep their Shitas alive. And that brings us to the 2 dots in the middle of the page. Famous Gemara. Amar Rav Chia Barashi, Amar Rav, Shi'urin, Chatzitzin, Umechitzin, Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. We know, of course, that there's a limited number of halachos L'Moshe Misinai. 3 of them have to do with Shi'urim, certain amounts, we'll see what they are. Some of them have to do with Chatzitzin. A Chatzitz, of course, is a separation between a mikvah and one's skin. And Mechitzin, the idea of just having separations. And the Shita of Ravashi, of Rav Chia Bar Ravashi, I should say. Rav Chia Bar Ashi is in the name of Rab, very, very early in the Amoraim, that all of these are halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Says the Gemara, absolutely not. We're going to ask on all 3 of them. We're going to ask on Shi'urin, Chatzitzin, and Mechitzin. Here we go. Shi'urin, do raisahi. It's not halacha l'Moshe Misinai. That's Mufurish pasuk in the Torah. How so? The Torah says, Dechsiv eretz chito sa'ora v'gomer. That's the pasuk in the Torah that we know from the Sheva Minim. Amar Rav Chanan, kol ha-pasuk hazeh l'Shi'urin nemar. The whole pasuk, you're telling me that the shiur are halacha l'Moshe Misinai? No. Rav Chanan says that the pasuk of Eretz Zavas Chalav Udvash is all about shiurim. How so? Chita, in regards to weave the chiditnan. This teaches us about a case of tzaras. There are only 2 cases when we have tumas ohel. One is by a mace and one is by tzaras. What's the application here of chita? Where we see that there's a shear of chita. Says the Gemara, hanichnas the beis hamenuga. If there's a house that has been paskin by a kohen that it has tzaras, and you have clothes on your shoulder, shoes and your rings in your hand. Right when you walk in, tumas ohel, you are tummy. However, and here's where the shear comes in for chita. Says the Gemara, if you're wearing your clothes and your shoes and your rings on your fingers, the person becomes tummy tumas ohel instantly. However, the hein tahorin, all of the clothes are tahor from tumas ohel. Ad sheyishe b'chdei achilas pras paschitin v'lo pas seorin. Mesa v'ochel b'liftan. How do we measure the amount of time it takes to become tameh with the clothes that you wear in a base menuga? It's the amount of time it takes to eat bread made of wheat. It was easier to digest, easier to eat than bread that was made of seorin. And it would be the measure of time when you're mesav, you're resting, and you're eating like a mensch, ve'ochel b'lifta, and you're dipping it in something, in a condiment of some kind. That's how we measure. That's how we measure b'chdei achilas pras. Now, of course, b'chdei achilas pras is something that's very halacha l'maisa. For example, it's Shabbos, you only take 1 bite of bread, you are not yotzei sudas Shabbos, and you are not chayav to bench. It's usher to bench. You only eat a bite. You have to eat a kizayis of bread b'chdei achilas pras to be mechayev you in birkas hamazon, or to be yotzei the sudas Shabbos. So the Kedei Achilas Pras is a regular shear. We use it all the time. A person is not allowed to fast on Yom Kippur for whatever reason. So the Rav may paskin for them, they have to eat b'shiurim. That's all based on Kedei Achilas Pras. They'll say, eat less than a kazayas outside of every 9 minutes. And then you're under the radar of the Din D'Oraisa. So says the Gemara, Chita, that's an example of a shear that's found in the Torah. So how could you tell me shiur nar halacha l'Moshe Misinai? Eretz Zavas Chalav Udvash, we have Chita. Let's go on. It's not just chita, it's also seora. 3 lines from the bottom. What about barley? Ditnan. Etzem kiseora. We know that a bone can be metame in the size of a barley, of a pearl of barley. Metame b'magu b'masavenu metame b'ohel. If you touch it, if there's no flesh on it, it's not going to be metame. This comes up with shilas about being, if you're a kohen, being around skeletons. Does a skeleton have a din of tumas ohel? Okay, whatever the shaila is. Good shaila. But here the Gemara seems to say that it would not have tumas ohel. And that's a shear that we see from Seor. Again, the same question. I don't understand. You told me that it's halacha l'Moshe Misinai. No, it's not, because Seor is a pasuk in the Torah. We see it by the Shivas Haminin. And what do we see? It's a shear. Next, Gefen. What about Gefen? Kedei revis yain l'nazir. We know that a nazir is not allowed to drink wine. So we have a shear by Gefen too, turning to the top of Dalet Amud Beis. Te'ena. Te'ena figs. We learned this 50 times in the previous Masechta. Kigrogris lotzah Shabbos. That is a shear for carrying on Shabbos. What about rimon? This should ring a bell. When a kli is no longer a kli because the hole is too large in the kli, when it's the size of a rimon, kid, it's not. Kol kli ba'alei batim shir kerimonim. When the hole is as big as a rimon, it is no longer a kli, no longer a status of tuma. Eretz zeis shemen. What's the drush on that pasuk? Eretz shekol shiurei kazesim. The land where all of its shiurim are the size of an olive. Asks the Gemara, have you not been paying attention? Kol shiurei sal kadaitach, everything? Kahani de amran. I just gave you 5 examples of things that don't have shir v'kazayis. So it can't be kol elaima eretz shiro shira kazesim. Okay, nacha drasha dvash. What about the shiva seminim of dvash, which is not honey from a bee, but it's honey from a date? Dvash kakosevas agasa lema kippurim. That's referencing a shear that's based on a kosevas gasa, on a large date. Liyom kippurim. That's a shear visser. So says the Gemara, you're trying to ask from me. You're trying to say, hey, wait a minute. Don't tell me that it's halacha l'mosh misinai revchia in the name of Rab. You're wrong. I have psukim. Says the Gemara, but Tizbara, you call that a raya? Is any of that mefurash in the Torah? All of that was mishnayis. The Tizbara, shiuran michtav ksive. Do you have a pasuk that says that a kakosebes is the shear for this and that a revis is the shear for a nazir? It's not listed anywhere. So says the Gemara, you might be wrong. Ella hilchasanin, who really it's halacha l'mosh misinai, and then the chachamim came around the other way. Oh, it's halacha l'mosh misinai. Okay, fine, but we're going to find Mara Makomos to support the idea of all these shiurim, and that's what they did. Bas mechin rabbanon akroi. I'll find you a pasuk. Halacha l'mosh misinai. That's really the Mara Makom for shiurim, but I'm going to find you psukim to support. So that's how we answer the first question of the Gemara about shiurim. That yes, Itaka is halacha l'mosh misinai, but all the Mari Mikomos that we just found are just to support the idea, but it's only after the fact, and we keep the first part of the Shita of Rav Chia Bar Ashi in the name of Rab alive. In that, shiurin are halacha l'mosh misinai. Question number 2, 7 lines down. Chatzitzin de'oraisa ninhu. Why would you say, Rav Chia Bar Ashi in the name of Rab, why would you say that chatzitzin are halacha l'mosh misinai? No, they are not. Chatzitzas psukim dechsi v'rachatzitz kol bisaro. You should wash all of your flesh, a drasha shelo yehi davar chotzitz ben bisaro l'mayim. That's pretty clear. That's not even the previous example of shiurin where it was like mishnayis. This is a drasha from a pasuk, an even better argument. B'mayim, the pasuk continues b'mei mikvah kol bisaro. What does that part of the pasuk mean? Mayim shekol gufa ol lebahen. This is all very clear. So you're going to tell me now that there's no pasuk. Now I really have a pasuk. Okay, it's not explicit in the pasuk, but it's at least a drasha. Rabbi Shmuel, the 13 hermeneutical principles, the Torah Nidreshes, none of them are explicit. All of them are doraisa. So I don't understand. This is a very good example. Says the Gemara, "V'kama how big is a mikvah?" And the Gemara says, "Ama al ama barum gimel amos." It is a volume equation: length times width times height. The volume of a mikvah is 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 amos. The shia rucha chamimei mikvah memsa? Question mark. If that's the case, asking the Gemara against the Shita Rav Chia Bar Ashi in the name of Rav, why would you say that chatzitzas halacha l'mosh misinai? Incorrect. I have a drasha that says otherwise. Answers the Gemara, very good question. I embrace your question and I agree with your question. None of that is the halacha l'mosh misinai. All of that is a din d'oraisa as found in the Torah. Ki itzrich, when do we say that it's halacha l'mosh misinai? Ki itzrich hilchasa, when do we quote that it's halacha l'mosh misinai l'sa'aro for hair? Uchede Rabba bar Rav Huna, da'ama Rabba bar Rav Huna, nima achas kshura chotzetes. If a woman goes to the mikvah and 1 strand of hair is tied in a knot, chotzetes, mikvah is not kosher. Shalosh, if she has 3 strands of hair and those 3 are tied together, you can't tie a tight knot with 3 hairs. Eina chotzetes, not a chatzitza. Shtayim, eini yodeya. And this is the halacha l'mosh misinai. Sa'aro, nami doraisi. Asks the Gemara, no, it's not. You want to say hair is halacha l'mosh misinai? I disagree. Why? Because Titania v'rachatzes kol besaro, and what's the drasha? Es hatafel lebisaro b'zehu se'ar. So I'm arguing again. You can't tell me that hair is the halacha l'mosh misinai by chatzitza. Regular chatzitza is for sure not, because that already we have psukim. Hair is also not. You tried with a brisa and a drush, it didn't work because we have another brisa that includes asatafel l'bisaro, that which is secondary to the body and that's hair. So next, let's try again, halfway down, daf daled amud beis. When do we say that there's halacha l'mosh misinai? This is not found in a pasuk. Very halacha l'maisa for going to the mikvah. This applies the halacha l'mosh misinai that Rav Chia Barashi Amar Rab was saying was lerubo ulamiuto ulemakbid uleshe'ein makbid. There are two areas, two camps, as it relates to going to the mikvah. And this is what the Gemara is going to say about them, that if a woman goes into the mikvah and 51% of her body is covered with something that she wishes wasn't covered, she's stuck covered, caked on mud, and 51% she wishes it wasn't there, and it's robe of her body, that is a psul, that's a chatzitza d'oraisa. Uchad Rav Yitzchak, Damar Rav Yitzchak, Dabar Torah. Here is your halacha l'mosh misinai. Ruba umakbid alav chotzeitz. If a woman goes into the mikvah, she's covered in paint, she wishes she wasn't 51%, and she wants to go to the mikvah to be able to be with her husband, that's a chatzitza d'oraisa. Pasha, she cannot be with her husband. That's obvious. V'she'eno makbid alav. What if she doesn't care? I happen to like body paint. I'm good. 51%, no problem. But I'm not makbid. Then midoraisa, that is not considered a chatzitza. And that's the halacha l'mosh misinai. The gazru al rubo she'eno makbid, mishum rubo ha-makbid. The Rabbanon came along and said, if it's 51%, but you happen to not be makbid about it, I'm concerned about that, say the Chachamim, and therefore they made a gzeira out of concern that it would be robe of her body when she's makbid. And also they made a gzeira derabbanon ve'al mi'uto ha-makbid, mishum rubo ha-makbid. Also, if it is, let's read this carefully, al mi'uto, al mi'uto ha-makbid, it's 49%, but she doesn't like that. So that should be derabbanan also. There's a gzeira there too, mishum rubo ha-makbid. The Ligzor asks the Gemara. It's a gzeira derabbanan for some, because the only time it's a chatzitza d'oraisa is when it's 51% and she wishes that it wasn't there. So let's say she fell into a vat of paint and it dried. 51% of her body is covered in paint and she wishes she wasn't there. She goes to the mikvah. She's a nida d'oraisa, a total chatzitza. Now, if one of those two factors are missing, either the fact that she's makbid, let's say she doesn't care, I like being covered in paint, or it's 49%, but she does care, that's derabbanan. And on those two cases, the Chacham made gzer derabbanan. That if a woman goes to the mikvah, then midoraisa, she's not a nida, but midorabanan she is. And the Gemara is going to try to take it one step further. The ligzor, maybe we should extend it still more. The ligzor nami al miuto. What about a case where it's 49% and she doesn't care? That's two of the positives. We don't want her to have a chatzitza. Maybe we should say, in that case, mishum, we should make a gzer mishum miuto hamakbid, because maybe it'll be 49%, but she does care. Inami, or the other side of that would be mishum rubo she'eno makbid, that it is 49%, but she does care. It'll be 51%, but she doesn't care. Says the Gemara, no. He gufa gzera. That's already a rabbinic injunction. The anna nekum v'nigzor gzera l'gzera. We don't do that. We're not making a second layer of rabbinic injunctions. Chachamim made a gzera. So basically, there are two factors: majority of skin covered, and does she care? If you have both factors that are checked off, that she cares, and it's 51%, chatzitza d'oraisa. If either feature is missing, only one of them, derabbanan, and all of the other is technically mutter. We're very makbid on this. If a woman were to go to a mikvah with nail polish on, you have to go ask her shaila before the couple's together. Let's say that after the mikvah, she takes off her shoes and I forgot I got a pedicure last week. You have to call and ask her shaila. If she'd be makbid on it, that's an isser derabbanan. She's pasal derabbanan. That's mamish this gemara. And this shaila comes up all the time. Let's say that a woman is wearing dentures when she goes to the mikvah. Let's say she has on one of those band-aids, a crazy glue, right? You have the crazy glue to cover a cut. These are all shilas that have to be asked to Rabbanim. You're makbid on that. You don't want to take it off. You have stitches under it, right? Or you don't have stitches under it. It's a real shilah. So a woman who has anything on her body, she has to be very careful. That's why today mikvah attendants, they're very careful to look to make sure that there's no nail polish, no whatever. They got to be very careful. Okay, let us continue. We are now at where are we now? Hold on a second. Yes, mechitzos teresa. So that was question number 2 about chatzitza, and we answered that halacha l'mosh misinai that there still is halacha al-Moshe Sinai in regards to Ruba Umakbid. That's not based on Psukim. And what Rav Chia Bar Ashi in the name of Rab was teaching us that the halacha al-Moshe Sinai by Chatzitza is about Ruba Umakbid. Case 3. 2/3 of the way down, a little bit more, Daf Daled Amud Beis, Mechitzos D'Oraisa Ninhu. You wanted to say that Mechitzos are halacha al-Moshe Sinai. I don't agree. There's only a limited list of halachas al-Moshe Sinai. These are Psukim. Let's see. Because the Amar Mar Aron Tisha V'Chapores Tefach Harei Kanasara. We know, we've learned this before, that the Aron was 10 tefachim tall when you include the kapores. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then maybe we should not say that that's halacha al-Moshe Sinai because it's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says it's 10 tefachim, and that's the minimum share for a mechitza. You want to tell me the minimum share for a mechitza is 40 tefachim from 10 tefachim from halacha al-Moshe Sinai? You're wrong. I have it right here. Says the Gemara, that's not true. No, because tzricha the Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion to Amar, Amas binyan ba'ama bas shisha. In regards to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, the outer structure of the Beis HaMikdash, we use 6 tfachim for the measure of an amma. But Amas kelim be'ama bas chamisha, no. But he held that when you built the kelim, even the aron, we followed the measure of 5 tefach per amma. And how does that play out? Because the height of the aron was 1.5 amos. Times 5 tfachim, that's 7.5. And when you add the 1 amma for the paruches, that's only 8.5. So that means that according to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, the whole height of the aron with the kapores, because he held that there were 5 tfachim to the amma by the kelim of the mikdash, that the total wasn't 10 tfachim. So you wanted to learn, like the Tanakama said, the mechitzos maybe they're doraisa. Maybe 10 tefachim is learned from the Mishkan. Not according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, who learned that there were fewer tefachim in the Amma, that aron is only 8.5 tefach tall, which is not our shear for a mechitza. Our shear is 10 tefachim. It says the Gemara, what would we do according to Rabbi Yehuda? Answers the Gemara, that's a good point. Ula Reb Meir, you're right. So there we would need a halacha al-Moshe Sinai for Reb Yehuda. But what about Ula Reb Meir? Damar kol ha'amos hayu beinonios. What if you say that the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash was all built evenly, all with the same amount, and it was actually 10 tefachim? Ma'ika lemeimar. What then would you say would be the halacha al-Moshe Sinai component? Because according to Reb Yehuda, yes, he needs halacha al-Moshe Sinai. But according to everybody else, you don't. So what then would the Shitas who are not Reb Yehuda, who agreed that the aron was 10 tefachim, what then was the halacha al-Moshe Sinai by them? Answers the Gemara, very simple. The Reb Meir, what was the halacha al-Moshe Sinai? Ki I saw hilchasa. What halacha was al-Moshe Sinai were we talking about in regards to mechitzos? 3 samples: legud, ulelavud, uledofen akuma. These 3 ideas are built on the principles of halacha al-Moshe Sinai. They are learned from there. A gud, as we will see, is a theoretical wall that either goes up or goes down. Good achis and good nachis. We'll see how these things apply later in a little bit here as well. We'll learn it in this Masechta, and certainly it applies in Sukkah too. We'll learn about lavud. Lavud is a halacha al-Moshe Sinai. If there are things that are within 3 tefachim, of which we'll see an example later today on the next amud, then they are considered sealed. It's considered 1 unit. If you were to build your the walls of your sukkah, the 10 tefachim, within 3 tefachim of each other, just bars across, that's as if it's a brick wall. Mamish barzel, no difference in halacha. And then the last one is Dofen Akuma, which we spoke about last night, that the wall that goes up and extends across before the schach up to Dalet Amos, as we saw last night, that too is halacha al-Moshe Sinai. Let us continue. The Gemara now saves space with the Shita of Rav Chia Bar Ashi in the name of Rab, that these 3 areas are considered halacha al-Moshe Sinai of Shiurin, Chatzitza, and Mechitza. Let's go back to our initial Mishnah. Let's say that our Mavui is 21 amos. What do we do? It says the Gemara, you want to lower it? Ask the Gemara, Kama memait. How much should I fix it? You're not lowering the top, actually. What you're doing is adding from the bottom. So how much do I have to add from the bottom? Kama memait. Ask the Gemara, Kama memait? Get a ruler. You got to get it under 20 amos. This isn't complicated. Kama mamait, kama the tzarichle. Whatever you need. You need to make it 2 feet. You're going to put a 2-foot stool right there to make sure. A 2-foot brick of whatever you're going to put there, of bricks, to make sure that the gap, the halal, is less than 20. Why is this complicated? Says Gemara, you're right. We're not talking about the height. Of course, we know that. Get under 20 amos. What we're talking about is the width of that platform that you're adding. Ela rachbo bekama. That is a machlokas hamoraim. Rav Yosef Amar Tefach. he says that it only has to be a tefach wide with a height of however much we need to get the halal to be less than 20. And Abai Amar Arba, he says, no, it has to be 4. That is the machlokas between them. And the Gemara is now going to present 4 different rationales for their machlokas. Let's get started with number 1. Lema b'hakam iflagei, 2 lines from the bottom, daf daled amud beis. Maybe this is what they're arguing about. Demand amar tefach, according to the sheet of Rabbi Yosef, who says that the width of what you're adding in order to reduce the halal, the width is a tefach because kasavar muter liishtamesh tachas hakora. You're allowed to use that space. Very important Rashi. The last Rashi on the page. Dibur hamaschil muter liishtamesh tachas hakora. De amar chudo hachitzon yored v'sosein. We look at the outer part, the part that's not inside the mavui, but outside the mavui. That's where we measure the 1 tefach wide bar from. So let's say, for example, that my Gemara is the brick on the floor, right? It's my phone's a little bit of a better example, right? So I'll just use my hand. It's even easier. So my hand is going to be the mavui up here, right? And I'm going to add in my phone to solve the problem of my 20 halal. Now it's 18. We're doing good. But how wide is it? So I'm in the mavui, and you guys are outside the mavui. So what we would say is that the outside of the tefach that's where we line up with the mavui. So that means the tefach is usable because it's inside the mavui. The line that drops from the mavui is right here on the outer part of the tefach. That's what this shita means in the Gemara. Kasavar muter liishtamesh tachas hakor. It's permissible to use that 1 tefach. It is inside the dropped theoretical line of the mavui. Almost an example of good, like we saw a couple of minutes ago. Turning to the top of Hamad Aleph. How much time do we have? We're doing good. Umanda Amar Arba'a, the Shita of Abaye. It was Abaye, right? Yeah, the Shita of Abaye says that it's Arba. He says, Kasavar Asr Lishtamesh Tachas Hakora. He says, no, it has to have a shear itself of a mabui, which is Dalid Tfachim. But he said that the Dalid Tfachim were pushed to the outside of the line of the mabui, and they were therefore unusable. That's one possibility to the machlokas. Says the Gemara, introducing approach number 2, lo, that's not at all what they're arguing about. The Kule Alma Kasabre, Mutar Lishtame Tachas Hakora. Everyone agrees you're allowed to use the space with which this let's call it a brick, that this brick is being used to limit the height, to lower the height so that it's now less than 20. Really, here's what Rav Yosef and Abai are arguing about. Mar Savar, Korah Mishum Heker. Rav Yosef is of the opinion that no, the whole point of the Korah on the top is just a Heker. So therefore a Tefach is fine. Umar Savar Korah Mishum Mechitza. But according to one, no, we're talking about a Mechitza, and therefore Abai would say the shear is Arba Tfachim. Third approach, Vibaisema, the Kule Alma, everybody agrees, Korah Mishum Heker. Everyone agrees, we paskin this way. Remember, we started off our Gemara not this way. We started off thinking that this whole 20 amos thing was all about how we define a Pesach. So now we're getting to the Psak. It took a few blot. We're on Daf Hey, not so bad. 4 blot in. Now we know how we paskin. We paskin the Dina Korah in Shulchan Aruch and Shin Samachein Orachim in the Halachos of Eruv. We paskin the Dina that a Korah is Mishum Heker. Good. Clear. And this is paskin this way. Good. So then the Gemara says as the third machlokes, Vibaisema de Kule Alma Korah Mishum. One more, sorry. Uvahaka miflage, third line. Uvahaka miflage, Mar Savar Korah Mishum Heker, Umar Savar Korah Mishum Mechitza. Answer number 3. Vibaisema de Kule Alma Korah Mishum Heker. Everyone agrees that the Korah is meant to be a Heker, to remind us not to carry. Here we're arguing, does the Heker at the top of the mavui have to be the same as the Heker at the bottom? Can they be the same? Or do they have to be different? Demar Savar Amrinan Heker Shalmata ke Heker Shalmala. According to what would be Rav Yosef, the Heker that's up the top that only has a requirement to be 1 tefach wide can match the one on the bottom. 1 tefach, perfect. Makes perfect sense. Umar Savar, Rav Yosef, but lo Amrinan Heker Shalmata ke Heker Shalmala. They do not match, and it therefore has to be 4 tefachim. Approach number 4, everyone would agree that it's totally okay for the top and bottom to be the same as it relates to Heker, both being 1 tefach. However, here, just a very practical concern, not a halachic concern. The door, right when you walk into your house. In my house, we have a piece of wood that you step on, the ledge. What's it called? The jam. What? The jam. You step on that to get into your house. Mine is getting warped. The paint is coming off. Even though it's an oil-based paint, it's been a long time. I need to repaint it. It's starting to break a little bit. This even happens with cement. So the question was, how concerned should we be? Do we have a gzera shema yivchos kamiflage? Do we say that this one tefach is going to break down? Rabbi Yosef says, I'm not so concerned. And the other shita says, I am concerned, Rabbi, and I want it to be a wider piece so that it doesn't break down. Because if in fact it gets lower and it gets narrower, you've lost your mavui. Now you're not allowed to carry anymore. That's the machlokas. Why Rabbi Yosef would say a tefach, and why Abaye would say arba tefach. 1/3 of the way down to Hamad Aleph. Let's continue. Haya pachos me'asara. A similar question. What about the lowest form of a mechitza? Haya pachos me'asara tefach v'chakak lo lahashlimo la'asara. You have a mechitza, and it's less than 10 tefachim, but you need it to be 10 tefachim to be a mechitza. So what do? You lower it by digging out some dirt. Not on Shabbos, but you lower it by digging out a little bit of dirt. Ask the Gemara, how much you have to dig out? And the same question of poor math. I don't understand your question. Dig so that there's at least a height of 10. Why are we asking ridiculous questions? Of course, the Gemara has a real answer to it. Ella, no, we're not talking about the depth of the digging. Of course, you have to dig deep enough to have a halal of eser, for sure. That's pasha. What's our question? Laterally, in regards to right and left or front to back, whichever iteration is just not up and down. The depth we know. But moving front to back, how wide does it have to be? Here we have a different machlokas. Answer the Gemara, same two people, different answers. Rav Yosef amar be'arba tfachim. It has to be a minimum of 4 tfachim. Abaye amar be'arba amos. It has to be 4 amos. Why? Lema b'de Rabbi Ami v'Rav Asi kamiflage. Maybe they are arguing in regards to whether or not they hold of Rav Ami and Rav Asi. What is the case of Rav Ami and Rav Asi? Let's see. The Itmar, the Amoraim discussed the following. Mavui shenifratz mitzido klape rosho. Okay, here's the case. Let's say we have 2 walls of a mavui. I'm in the mavui right now. This is mavui land right here. And this is the wall to the mavui, and this is the exit to the public. Right here, there's a big hole on the wall, on my inner wall. Okay, that's the case we're talking about back in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, I'll read the case again. Mavui shenifrat mitzido, that wall on one of the sides toward the front, klape rosho, toward the entrance of the mavui, has a hole in it. Itmar mishmei de Rav Ami v'Rav Asi, and it was said in their name. What do we do with that hole? Does it ruin our mavui? That's the question that was on the table. Im yesh sham pas arba'a. If in fact in the mavui, in this piece of the wall right here, if there is a pas, if there is a beam's worth of 4 tfachim that are already here, if there is that, then says the Gemara, if there is 4 tfachim, matir bepirza ad eser, then the hole that's there is a regular pirza, and we have our regular rules, up to 10 amos, no problem at all. But the imlav, if there isn't 4, then that hole has to be treated differently. Then pachos mishlosha matir, then if it's less than 3, we look at it like lavud, like we just learned, that hole, it's as if it's not there, because the hole is less than 3 tfachim. And shlosha, but if it's 3 or wider, eino matir. Now, this works out beautifully if you hold like Rav Yosef. The Rav Yosef, who was of the opinion of 4 tfachim, who says that 4 tfachim is the depth that you need in order to build a mechitza. What are we talking about here? A mechitza. What's the breadth of that little pas? The front part, how much of it is still intact? 4 tfachim? Perfect. Rav Yosef aligns perfectly with Rav Asi. So says the Gemara, the Rav Yosef, Isle de Rav Ami. Abaye, Lesle de Rav Ami. It must be that that's what they're arguing about. And because Abaye doesn't hold the Rav Yosef, he defaults to a larger number of Daled Amos. Says the Gemara, Amar lach Abaye, no, lav dafka, that this is hinged upon the case that Rav Ami and Rav Asi were discussing, because maybe we're talking about different cases. Maybe the case that we were talking about, Hasam, Sof Mavui, Hacha Tchilas Mavui. In the case of Rav Asi, he was talking about Tchilas Mavui, where the hole was very close to the entrance of the Mavui, where it meets the Rishus Harabim, or really a Carmelis, of course, because we can't, I guess it could be Rishus Harabim, technically. The Mavui has to be Draban. So right now, the hole is over here, according to the case of Rav Asi. But maybe the Machlokes that Rav Yosef and Abaye were having was not here. Maybe it was further back in the Mavui on a back wall. And therefore, says Abaye, Nishta, you cannot learn anything from here. Maybe the cases are not comparable. So that's what Amar lach Abaye, the cases are different. Hasam, Sof Mavui, Hachat Chilas Mavui. Ika Arba Amos in Ilolo. And he supports his own shita. If there's Daled Amos, then your mechitza is kosher. And if not, none. He doesn't have a reason to change his mind because Rav Ami and Rav Asi is not shaykh to his shita. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, where do I get my shita from of Dalet Amos? How did I know that when you're digging out a mechitza to make sure that the depth has a halal of 10 and that its breadth is Dalet Amos, where did I get the Dalet Amos piece from? So he's going to give us an answer. Amar Abaye, Mino Aminallah Detanya. The Mavui, we learn the following brisa. Ein Mavui nitar belechi v'koreh. You're not allowed to carry in a Mavui with a lechi or koreh. Ad sheyehu batin v'chatzeros psuchim l'sochav. Until that Mavui has houses and chatzeros that dump into the Mavui. So if on my page, we have two walls, one wall that doesn't exist here, so you can see it's a cross section, and here we have an actual wall. But really there are doorways here from a chatzer so people can walk into the Mavui. It's a fairly public place. People can access this mavui. The daf itself is the mavui. People can access it from all sides. So that's what the brisa says. The only way that a mavui is nitar, that it becomes mutter to carry with a lechi or a koreh, is when houses and chatzeros open to it. The ibidalid, if it's hard to know when it's tfachim or amos, you have to really hold cup. The ibidalid, if all you're saying is that the depth, the inwards depth of a mavui is only 4 tfachim, what's the metzias? How do you have it be the case that a chutzner is going to dump into a 4 tefach deep space? It's not big enough. That's why he doesn't agree with Rabbi Yosef, because that's not called a mavui. It's just too small. Says the Gemara, maybe you'd say, we're not talking about these walls. We're talking about the back wall, and maybe the back wall is super wide. That's a good answer. Except that the Gemara rejects it because, as we know, v'chitema never works out well for the recommendation. And the Gemara says, v'chitema de pasach labedofen hamsai, that's not possible because a mavui has a templated shape of a rectangle. V'ha'amar of Nachman nikitinan ezu mavui shinter belechi bekoreh. What is a mavui for which a lechi and a koreh work? That only applies kol she'or kol yeser al rochbo. You can't use the recommendation that maybe the chatzeros that are dumping into the mavui are this back wall. Because we know, this is our Masorah, Nikitinan, that always means we have a tradition. Rashi here, there's a beautiful Rashi here. We should just learn it quickly because it's beautiful and it's short. Rashi says, 7 lines from the bottom. Dibur hamaschel ve'amar of Nachman, Nikitinan. Misores me avosenu, uminhag me rabosenu. Very powerful. That's what Nikitinan means. We have a Masorah. A mavui is rectangular, where the depth of the mavui is always longer than the width of the mavui. So back to our question. How can it be 4 tfachim? Abaye his brain can't handle it. It's not possible. Because if you have 4 tfachim depth, the back has to be less, because we know the rectangular shape that's Nikitina, that's our Masorah. So how is everything dumping in here? This is a tiny space. It's 6 inches. My gosh, it's tiny. It's a rectangle. So we were talking about, what we're discussing here is when you dig out a mechitza, the depth, according to Rabbi Yosef, is allowed to be 4 tfachim. And Abaye is like, what are you talking about? A mavui has to have chatzeros dump into it. 4 tfachim? 6 inches, you have a mavui? You can't even stand in 6 inches. Our shoes are bigger than that. So says the Gemara. Let's see what the Gemara answers. The Rabbi Yosef, what would Rabbi Yosef say? Strange answer. The Rabbi Yosef de pasach lehu bekeren zavis. And Rashi, Tosfos on the bottom here has a picture where you can see. Do you have that picture, the grid on the bottom in Tosfos? I have it here. This grid that looks like this. You can see here. It's a 4x4 grid. Just show it to you guys on camera. A 4x4 grid where the side walls are angled. What do we know about triangles? That the hypotenuse is always longer. But how much longer? How much longer is it? It's not that much bigger. What is it? Is it 6 tfachim? But the Gemara embraces this as a possibility for Rabbi Yosef, which mathematically is very strange. The reason why we accept it is because we assume that there is a minimum shear of a door. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi, Dibur hamaschil bekeren zavis, tefach min hapesach. The first tefach is straight. And then bedofen hamtzoi, tefach min hapesach, bedofen hamtzoi. The gimel tfachim bedofen hemshech, v'chein betzido hasheni kazeh, and he draws it for us. And that is how Rabbi Yosef says that the Daled Tfachim still works. Again, very difficult to answer. The Metzias that we're talking about could almost fit in our palm. This is a diorama. This is not a place where people live. But nevertheless, halachically speaking, theoretically speaking, we have a minimum shear of a doorway, which is smaller, which is large enough to fit on this angle, on this angled wall. So then the Gemara therefore tries to find another Mari Makom for Abaye, 7 lines from the bottom, right on time. Amar Abaye mina aminallah. I need another Mari Makom to prove my shita that the depth of a mechitza has to be Dalet Amos. The Amar Rami Barchama Amar Ravuna Lechi Habolet Midofno Shel Mavui. Let's say that at the entry point of our mavui, right here, you have a lechi that's sticking out of the side wall of the mavui. If it's pachos me arba amos, it's kind of like a little bit of just a little tiny wall. It's short. If it's pachos me arba nidon mishum lechi, then it has a din of a lechi. And ve'eno tzarech lechi acher lehatir. Then you need nothing else. If the wall has a built-in extension and it's less than 4 amos, you're good. You're allowed to carry it. That's just as good as a lechi. However, if it's Dalet Amos, then Nidon Mishum Mavui, then it's just part of the wall itself. It doesn't have the status of a lechi, and therefore, V'tzarech Mavui Acher Lahatira. How would Rav Yosef get out of this? Seemingly a wonderful Mari Makom. It's a source for Abaye that Dalet Amos is the minimum shear. For Rav Yosef, he says, you kind of got it right, but not really. For Rav Yosef, he holds, La Fuke Mitoras Lechi Adiika Arba Amos. It's true that in order to get out of the status of a lechi, that would have to be 4 amos. But you could even have a wall that's 4 tfachim that could be part of a mavui if it's not built as a lechi. That's also possible. And that's how he skirts the 2 rayas that Abaye tries to bring. And then Rav Yosef is still standing after all of this. Just this last sugya that we just learned, Sikum Advarim, is when we have to dig out to get the depth of a mechitza. How wide do we have to go? Rav Yosef said 4 tvachim. Abaye said 4 amos. We will stop here for tonight on Shabbos, Yimir Hashem, Daf Hamid Beis and Daf Vav in its entirety, and wishing you all a beautiful, beautiful Shabbos.